Are you learning Duport Etude number 11 for either all state, all region, or just to improve your technical skill? Stay tuned and I will give you a few tips so that you can learn how to master this etude and play it confidently. Hi, my name is Liz from Cellomoji.com, and I give you tips and tricks so that you can learn how to master new skills and new pieces of music on your cello. If you are in Texas and you are an advanced string player, you already know that all of the all-state, all-region etudes are posted on the TMEA website, and Duport 11 is one of the etudes this year for cello. Now, if there are any questions or things that I don't address, or you need to double check something about the etudes, you can always check out the TMEA website and look under your instrument and you can see some of the notes that they put. Even if you aren't auditioning for all-state, all-region, this is a great etude to learn, and etudes in general are great to learn because it really helps improve a lot of technical skills that you will need as you are learning new pieces of music on your cello. Okay, so first off, this is a really important one. Make sure that you have the right Duport edition. So actually, before this year's TMEA etude list was announced, I already actually owned a Duport book with the etude in it. But when you look at the website, they're actually pretty specific about which edition, and they even put like the little number next to it. So it's important that you get that one, because I actually went out and got that one and compared the two copies, and they are actually, even just visually, they're different, and there are different markings in there. So it's really important that you get the right edition, because if they're taking the steps to list the specific edition that they want you to play off of, then make sure you are really playing off of that one. So in this case, it is the Duport Schirmer edition, and the number code is 502-55840. So make sure that you are looking at that one. You can enter it in Google search or any type of sheet music purchasing place so that you can make sure to get the right edition. Ironically, the errors that are listed on the TMEA website for this Duport Etude are actually, funny enough, not in my original edition. Like, my original edition actually has the correct notes and everything in it, but the edition that they're telling you to read off of and to learn off of actually has these errors of notes in them. So it's really important for you to double check the notes in these measures. Before we go on, if you are liking these tips videos where you learn about different pieces of music and etudes as well, be sure to give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button and the bell next to it so you won't miss any other Cellomoji videos. Okay, so the two most important errors to note in the Duport Etude are actual physical notes that are printed incorrectly, so make sure that you correct these. The first one is in measure 7. It's the 5th note of that measure. It's not an E, it's a D. And then the second one to note is in the following measure, in measure 8, the 5th note of that measure is a D and not a C. So these are really important because this is part of sort of the pattern that is happening at the time. So make sure you change those notes to the correct notes so that you will be playing that pattern through that passage. This is just sort of a printer error, but if you are an advanced player, you probably are already automatically doing the right fingering. But just to sort of reinforce this, they note on page 2, line 9, the last measure of that line, there's a finger number that's listed there as 1, 2, and 4. You can see it in that measure there, but instead of 1, 2, and 4, which is kind of physically awkward and not very practical, just swap the two numbers. It should be 1 to a 4 to a 2. So 1 on G, 4 on B, 2 on the E. You're probably already doing that, but just to confirm that you're doing it correctly, they listed that on the website. So I thought this was interesting. On the TMEA website, they listed actually what they said was optional fingering. So like on page 2 and page 3, there are moments when the fingering that is listed there is having you cross over all the way to the C string. So you're actually in thumb position on the C string. And that is a challenge in itself to just produce a really, really good sound and make it sound good and be confident with intonation. So they actually list on the website that you can opt out of that completely and you can do whatever fingering you want. So I think that is a really big clue in terms of just remember, ultimately you have to always produce the best and most beautiful sound that you can. It is a little bit less of like, hey, I can play all the way over to the C string, and more about sound and sound quality. So if you can cross over to the C string and feel confident about producing a great sound, then by all means do it. I'm not saying not do it. But a lot of people may have cellos that just don't sound good up there, which totally is understandable. And you may opt to actually just put it down into an easier position where you know you can definitely produce a nice sound. So go for it. They're telling you that's totally okay. Just keep in mind that the fingering that you pick, you really want to make sure you're picking a practical one, because it's not only that passage, you actually have to prep yourself for the following passage. So by coming down and not staying in position to cross over to the C string, it may actually start making some of the following passages a little bit harder to start, because you're going to have to make a bigger shift or a big jump. So make sure you are practicing that so that the intonation stays nice and consistent. Alright guys, so here is a quick demonstration of a section that you could use an alternative fingering for. So this one is found on page 3 of the Duport Etude. I'm 3 lines down and I'm on the last measure there. So I'm just going to start up in treble clef. So I'm starting on the C. So instead of going to the thumb on the E, which is the second note of the measure, I'm going to play 1 and then 3 on the E. 2. Shift down to a C. So instead of going over to the D string, which the directions say, I'm going to stay on the A string and come down the A string. So it's C, come down, C. Thumb is on the A, 4 on the G sharp, 4 on the D, 1, 4, 2. You can do 2 on this G. So again, I'm not on the C string, even though the music is saying that. I'm staying now on the D string. Here you can use your open D, go to a 2, 1 on the B, half position A, F sharp 2, and then you'll be all set and ready for the next line. So just to show that one more time in super slow-mo, again, I'm starting 3 lines, so the 3rd line from the top, the last measure of that line starts with a C. So here we go. Okay, so the next big tip is to play with a metronome. In this case, they give you a range of a quarter note equals 100 to 118, which it's not like that it's super fast or super slow. The main thing for you will be to make sure that you stay steady throughout this whole etude. And this etude is a long one, so the faster that you can get to practicing in your ideal tempo range, the better off you will be. So I'm gonna just take a mini gamble here. So the Duport Etude in the edition that they're telling you to play off of is 3 pages long, and that is super long. The likelihood that they're going to ask you to play through the entire etude in an audition probably is not very high. However, you cannot just like systematically exclude certain sections of the etude just because you feel like it. Now, if you're doing all region, they've already given you cuts in terms of where they want you to practice, because that is the section they're going to ask you to do. But when it comes to all state, they ask you to prepare the entire etude, and then usually what they'll do is they'll just pick a section for you to play. They won't necessarily make you play the whole thing. So my recommendation, because you can't really predict what section they're going to ask you to play, is Practice playing the etude starting from different sections every time. Don't always start from the beginning and play from the beginning to the end, because that is just sort of training your body to be the freshest and most comfortable at the beginning. But what if they asked you to start from page 2 or somewhere on page 3? You really want to be able to be flexible to start anywhere that they ask you to do. So make sure that you yourself are practicing like every day. Start from a different measure and try starting right there. And you will find that you'll feel more comfortable and better prepared no matter where they ask you to start. Also, make sure that you are practicing running through the entire etude. Now, like I said before, probably they won't make you play all 3 pages in the etude. However, by playing through from beginning to end and including that as part of your practice regiment, you will actually build up stamina, because sustaining this sort of bow stroke for 3 pages can be quite tiring. So I would make sure that you are starting from the beginning and going to the end, and make sure you just run it a couple times to sort of get your arm muscles built up so that you can build up stamina to play through the whole etude. The biggest thing that I'm seeing when I'm hearing students play through this etude is consistency of the bow stroke. So for yourself, you're going to have to decide, what does springing bow mean? Is it super like short and bouncy? Is it a little more brush stroke? I mean, it's not super specific, let's be honest here. Do I think it's spiccato? Maybe not necessarily, because of the tempo marking that they give you. It's not like super fast. The main thing that you need to make sure that you can do is try to think of a bow stroke and practice this bow stroke and see if you can maintain that consistently all through the etude. And then that is the bow stroke that you need to stick to. Just know that when it does say springing bow, it is not on the string. So even if you're practicing this etude fairly slowly, I would actually practice the bow stroke off the string. So you are not like just bowing it on the string, unless you're just trying to like learn the notes. But once you have the notes down and you are trying to like master the style and really like get the etude to the higher level, you really want to practice as soon as possible the bow stroke itself, because that's how you're going to build consistency and how you're going to build stamina to maintain the stroke for the entire etude. So this etude in itself, compared to other etudes in the past, may not be technically super difficult, but in terms of the bow stroke and concentrating on the bow stroke and maintaining that, along with intonation and oh yeah, that thing called musicality, those things are going to be really, really hard to do. So I would make sure that you are practicing this meticulously so that maybe when it comes time to actually play for the audition, you won't have to like think through a million different things, and some of those things will already be built in through your practicing. So even though I know you have a bunch of things to think about, intonation, bow stroke, you also have to think about musicality. Now I know that etudes are not the most interesting thing in the world, and this etude unfortunately is no exception. And to top it off, in this edition there isn't even really that many dynamic markings written in, but you've got to just sort of make this into like a musical masterpiece, if you will. Go for the obvious. If the contours are going up, you can totally crescendo. If they're coming down, you can decrescendo. Think about phrasing and how you can make them sound like sentences and less like monotone sort of recitations of all of these notes that are coming out of your bow. Another thing that some people might find confusing is that in this edition there are some words that says like same and then POS, or position is what it's short for, and basically it's just telling you that the next passage is all within the same position and that you don't need to move your hand. And how you tell how long that is for is they write those dotted lines underneath it. So it's kind of reminiscent to sort of like Suzuki type teaching, where they actually give you all these dotted lines and show you this nice little bracket of where you're keeping in one position. This is the same thing, they're just writing the words and the dotted lines for you to note. So use that to your advantage in case you are wondering about some of the fingerings that are going on in there. So this tip I know can be a little bit controversial across different cello players, but I want to just remind you that articulation can actually be enhanced a little bit by your left hand. So this means that there has to be a little bit of firmness when your left hand is coming down on the notes. Now, it's not meaning that you have to do like excessive banging of your left hand just for the sake of banging, because that's like distracting and not really beneficial, and you might hurt your fingertips on top of that. But there is something to be said for that when you are being firm and articulate with your fingers coming down on the strings, you're going to find that the notes almost have a little bit of extra pop to them. So you have to really make sure you're coordinating that well with your bow stroke as well, because I mean, getting that kind of articulation and speed with your finger down can definitely sort of change the timing between your left hand and your bow stroke working together. So make sure you are practicing that. Pay attention to page 2, line 1 and 2. It is the only section that is like super lyrical in this etude. Usually when I see stuff like this, I can safely assume that this is going to be part of the audition, because the rest of the time you're just going to be doing all these technical bowings, and here's the opportunity for you to show a judge like how lyrical, how beautiful your notes can be. So make sure you are definitely taking some time to make the phrasing of this beautiful, the intonation of this has to be spot on. Don't disregard and sort of like pass over this section. I can guarantee you that usually when something is going on for a super long time and then there's this sudden change, most of the time a lot of auditions sort of like hone in on that to see how quickly a cello player can sort of change on a dime like that. In terms of intonation in that passage, the second line has a fingering of thumb to third finger there, and it seems deceptively easy. It's not like the notes are like super hard or anything like that, but just keep in mind about this. Thumb is not really a common fingering that we use, and so you may be new to using thumb position, so make sure that you are feeling confident about where your thumb is, and then make sure you are feeling confident in terms of playing the note after that. And the reason why I'm pointing this out, and definitely practice with a tuner, is because that's the interval of a perfect fourth. So there is something about playing perfect intervals on string instruments, perfect fourths, fifths, octaves. If you had to play like unison notes, they're kind of a pain to really get in tune, and so I want you to really make sure you practice that and not disregard that interval, because it's a perfect fourth, it's using an awkward fingering with your thumb. Make sure you're really practicing that so that it can sound beautiful and easy to the listener listening to you. So I just want to put this in as a note. Make sure that you are just being patient with yourself. You know, don't cram practice this etude. It's like kind of impossible to do. 3 pages is a lot of music to learn, and you know that it's not the only etude. There's the other etude to learn as well. You really want to make sure that you are paying attention to the details and being really meticulous about learning it the first time and slowly and properly, so that when you are trying to speed it up and by the time the audition comes around, you are feeling super, super confident. So also just keep in mind, you know, they pick these etudes because they are a challenge. They're not like easy. They're meant to show off like what kind of skill set you have, like what kind of attention to detail can you do. So take your time with it. Don't get too frustrated. Make sure to take breaks, break it down into chunks. Make sure you have people listening to you, have lessons with it, and you will find that you will build up lots of confidence playing this etude. So do you have any questions or comments that I haven't addressed in this video? Be sure to leave them in the comment box below. If there are other music tips that you would like to learn, or etudes for example, you can also leave those in the comment box below. Give me a thumbs up if you haven't already done so, and thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!